rankings changes, some key defensive plays that we maybe haven't talked enough about, another ticket/attendance storyline that we need to shoot down, and maybe the most interesting thing that anyone has said this week. It's all right here on your Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt. Welcome to the Morning Pitt. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know we do this show every day, Monday through Friday. It's kind of your start to the day right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's our YouTube page. You can always hit that subscribe button right there, and you'll always know when we release a new one of these episodes. We put one out every morning, Monday through Friday. And it's just a 10, 15, 20, 25 minute, however long it takes us to get through whatever you need to know to get into your day. And we do it every day. And if you want to make sure that you never miss any of these videos, you never want to miss our Wednesday night live show that we do. We're doing it tonight. We're back on Wednesday nights at 8:30 tonight. If you want to make sure you never miss any of our post-game shows, like the one we did at 1:30 in the morning after the Backyard Brawl, or the one we'll do this Saturday night after the Tennessee game, you hit that subscribe button and you will get a notification and know whenever we go live. And so if you're worried, you're like, oh, wait, when are we going live? Or when's that Morning Pitt coming out? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you will never miss any of it. And of course, the website right there, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. I always say we produce the content. We put out a lot of content. We've got some film breakdowns coming today. We got some recruiting articles coming today. We've got more coverage from the South Side where Pitt's players and coaches have been addressing the media this week. We got a lot of stuff there. You can read it all, you digest all of that content, and then go to the message boards and discuss it with other Pitt fans. It's kind of it's the best of both worlds. It's the content and the community. And I think it's the best online gathering of Pitt sports fans that you're going to find. You know, I mentioned earlier, I don't want you to forget, tonight, Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m., we've got our live Panther-Lair show, which we do every Wednesday right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Set your clock by that. We will be live at 8:30 or 8:31, somewhere around there, and talk about everything from the Backyard Brawl and everything heading into this game against Tennessee. And the fun thing about the live show, I mean, we do, like, you know, I'm probably going to talk about a lot of the things that I talk about right here on the Morning Pitt. But the fun thing about the live show is there's the chat screen. And so you can post your comments and your questions. And, you know, I'll read your comments and react to them. I'll answer your questions as much as we can over the course of an hour or so. And it's really kind of like a talk show. It's like a call-in show, but without phones. You just type your message and I read it, and we'll interact. We go back and forth about it. And it's a good time. I think it's always fun doing the live show, and certainly now that we're into football season, it's even more fun. So set your clock for that. 8:30 p.m. We'll be live tonight. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And we're moving through the week here, middle of the week. And, you know, Pat Narduzzi had his weekly press conference on Monday. Yesterday, Charlie Partridge and Dave Borbely and Brandon Hill talked to the media. A few more players will talk to us today. And then Pat Narduzzi will have one final press briefing tomorrow. Nothing on Friday, and then the game on Saturday. But I think we've already hit the point of hearing the most interesting thing we're going to hear from a Pitt player or coach this week. And no, it's not Pat Narduzzi using bad words. I talked about that yesterday. It's a different comment that Pat Narduzzi made during his press conference on Monday. And I might have touched on it here or there, but I really think it was the most interesting thing that he said on Monday. And I think it might be the most interesting thing that we're going to hear all week, because it kind of speaks to something we've talked about since the game ended on Thursday night, since the end of the Backyard Brawl. I mean, that night we talked about it, and we talked about it through the weekend, and we've certainly talked it on the Morning Pitt the last couple of days, and it's been a common topic, definitely getting a lot of play on the message boards. And it's about Kedon Slovis and that broad question of whether or not he's good or whether or not he played well. And then sort of on a more narrow point, did he hold on to the ball too long? He took 5 sacks, and some of that's on the offensive line, but a fair amount of it, it looked like he was just hanging in the pocket too long, waiting too long for the right receiver to get to the exact right spot when he needed to get rid of the ball sooner. And you probably caught this quote from Pat Narduzzi on Monday. If you didn't, I'm going to read it to you. He said, quote, I thought Kedon played a really good game, really good, better than I thought when I watched it live. But we thought he was late with the ball, but there was other issues with some of the routes, and I won't get into the weeds with that. But he was waiting on his receivers to get where they needed to be, and they weren't there for whatever reason that we won't discuss. And he goes on to say, quote, there were some things there, some angles that weren't right where he's got to hold on to it and just throws it away because of some departure angles on routes and little things like that. Just details that you guys probably wouldn't see on tape. I didn't see it. It's news to me when I listen to Coach Cignetti. He's really sharp. End quote. Now, I think that is really interesting. It stood out to me on Monday, and I've been thinking about it a lot over the last couple of days because, you pull back, and the big picture on Pitt this season is whether or not Kedon Slovis can play, whether or not Kedon Slovis can lead Pitt to a win, whether or not he's good enough. And you go into that season opener, and you leave the game kind of with those questions. Wait, is he good enough? I've said that it was sort of the quietest 300-yard game that I've seen in a long time. I literally, we're sitting in the post-game press conference, and in my head, I thought he threw for like 215 yards. And I look down at the box score and I'm saying, 308? What? When did he get 300 passing yards? I didn't see that happen, but it didn't feel like a 300-yard game, but there it was, 16 of 24 for 308 yards and a touchdown. And so, just by the numbers, he had a pretty good game. He was 68% completion percentage. You go on Pro Football Focus, they have a stat adjusted completion percentage. It sort of accounts for throws on target. It doesn't penalize the quarterback for dropped passes or throwaways and things like that. And throws on target, his adjusted completion percentage was 78.3%. His adjusted completion percentage. So it's completions plus drops divided by throws on target or something like that. Anyway, he completed a high percentage of his passes. He didn't throw any interceptions, and he topped 300 yards. Oh, and he averaged nearly 20 yards per throw on his completions. 20 yards, average almost like 19.5 yards per completion. Now, we'll talk about that in a second because I know the but that comes with that. And believe me, I want to talk about that. But I want to get back to this idea that Narduzzi proposed and suggested and said that was actually what was happening in the game because it was about the sacks. Because that was one of the biggest criticisms coming out of Thursday night's game was that Kedon Slovis didn't have good pocket presence and he took too many sacks. He was sacked 5 times and some of those looked like he was just standing in the pocket for too long. Well, what if we look at it the other way? What if we look at maybe what Kedon Slovis was seeing? And Pat Narduzzi says, he says there were, receivers. He was waiting on his receivers to get to where they needed to be, and they weren't there for whatever reason. Now, you add that quote on top of what Pat Narduzzi said 2 weeks ago at his first Monday press conference of the season when he said the receivers were giving him chest pains. And he cited details. He said there were issues with details. And I didn't know what to make of that. I don't think most of us knew really what Narduzzi was talking about. But you fast forward to the actual game, and those receivers aren't getting to their spots. They're not getting the right departure angles, as Narduzzi said, little things like that. Quote, little things like that, just details that you guys probably wouldn't see on tape. I didn't see it, he says, end quote. It kind of comes together, and it paints a different picture of Kedon Slovis. And I think it paints a different picture of how we perceive Kedon Slovis's play in the backyard brawl. And it comes back to Narduzzi's first quote. Quote, I thought Kedon played a really good game, really good, better than I thought when I watched it live. Pat Narduzzi came out of the backyard brawl thinking the same thing you and I did. Slovis good? We had that question of like, wait, did he play well or not? Because it kind of seemed like he didn't. Well, according to Pat Narduzzi, he had the same reaction coming out of the game. And then he went back and looked at it, and he looked at it with Frank Cignetti, and Cignetti kind of broke down where some of the issues were and how the receivers weren't getting to their spots and departure angles and all these different things. And now it paints a fuller picture. That it wasn't just Slovis holding on to the ball too long. That maybe if the receivers are getting to the right spots, maybe it's not a 300-yard game, it might be a 350-yard game or a 400-yard game. The possibility is really there if the receivers are a little more detailed in the routes that they were running. If they're a little more precise and a little more accurate in the routes that they were running. And so obviously that creates a situation where the coaches know what they need to work on going into the week, and the players know what they need to work on going into this next week. and that'll be something they have to do better at. But I do think it changes the perception of Slovis and how Slovis played in week one. It changes my perception. Pat Narduzzi certainly sounds like his perception has been changed. And I wonder if when you hear those quotes, it changes your perception as well. Now, the other thing that has come up when we talk about Kedon Slovis in this 308-yard game is the yards after the catch. And there's no question that it was a big part of it. Jared Wayne has a 64-yard catch. Rodney Hammond has a 49-yard catch. And a lot of those yards came after the catch. Jared Wayne finished with 51 yak yards. I shouldn't say yak yards. He didn't finish with 51 yards after the catch yards. He finished with 51 yards after the catch. Rodney Hammond finished with 54 yards after the catch. All told, Pitt had 163 yards after the catch. That accounted for 52.9% of Slovis's passing yards. And people want to say, okay, yeah, Slovis had a 300-yard game, but he got all those yak yards. And somehow we hold that against Kedon Slovis, where, I said Thursday night, and I've said it a couple times since then, that he put the ball where his playmakers and his skilled players and his receivers and backs could get it and make a play. And that's absolutely what happened with Wayne, and it's absolutely what happened with Hammond. Now, Hammond was a product of a great play design, great play call, and really good execution and some good blocks from Bub Means. But I don't know how we can hold that against Kedon Slovis and say, yeah, but on his 300-yard game, when, just because 52.9% of his passing yards were yak yards. Just kind of going over some other stats. Drake May, who is, I think, the leader in FBS passing yards right now, 40% of his passing yards so far this season have been yak yards after the catch. Drake May from North Carolina. Jordan Travis, who everybody's really high on right now after his performance at Florida State in a couple of games, I think he's got 43% of his passing yards this season have been yak yards. Kenny Pickett last year, as far as I can tell, roughly 45% of his passing yards came after the catch. How about Stetson Bennett this season? So Georgia, they blew out Oregon. Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck combined to throw for 421 yards. Bennett had the bulk of that. Of those 421, 306 came after the catch. 72.7% of the passing yards in Georgia's win over Oregon came after the catch. Last year, Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner, Alabama. Okay, the whole Bryce Young threw for 4,860 yards. Alabama as a team threw for 5,061 yards, so another 200 yards on top of Young's stats. And I couldn't break it down on yak yards per quarterback, so we'll look at Alabama as a whole. It's basically Bryce Young's stats. 2,730 yards after the catch for Alabama out of 5,061. 53.9% of Alabama's passing yards last season came after the catch. That's 1% more than Slovis had on Thursday night. Don't dismiss Slovis's performance on the fact that there were a lot of yards after the catch. That's what's supposed to happen. Very few quarterbacks gain all their passing yards on air yards, and their receiver is dropped as soon as they catch the ball. That's not usually how it happens. You get those yards after the catch. Those count just like your air yards, and I give you a lot of credit if you're able to get the ball to your playmakers and let them make plays. Hopefully putting it into context like that can kind of take a little bit of the pressure off. But it all comes back to this main question of whether Slovis can lead them to a win for me, the main question is, can he lead them to a win in a shootout? And it's broader than that. Can Frank Cignetti call the kind of game where you win a shootout? And I talked about this a lot over the course of the summer. I feel like if you watch the Panther-Lair show or listen to the weekend recap, that kind of the predecessor to this show that we just did on Monday mornings, I talked about it a lot. I talked about, can this Pitt team win a shootout? Last year's team could. With Mark Whipple calling plays and Kenny Pickett at quarterback, not to mention Jordan Addison at wide receiver, that offense could go blow for blow with just about anybody. And they did. They had some crucial mistakes against Miami and against Western Michigan, but they were certainly capable of going shot for shot in those games. It wasn't a matter of the offense just wasn't built to compete like that. That offense was built to win games like that. we need to see if this year's offense can do it as well. And when I talked about this all offseason, when I talked about whether or not this offense could win a shootout, whether they could win that kind of high-scoring affair, the game that I was always picturing when I was talking about this was Tennessee. Tennessee is the game where we know they're going to run up-tempo offense. We'll talk about this in a second. We know they're going to go fast. They're going to take shots, and they're probably going to connect on them. You know, I mean, nobody needs to be reminded of what happened last season when Tennessee had a bunch of opportunities for deep shots, where they had beat Pitt's defense and Joe Milton just missed. Hendon Hooker didn't miss like Joe Milton missed. Hendon Hooker is now the starting quarterback. Hendon Hooker's going to be a problem, even though Pitt has faced him a bunch of times and he's mostly been okay or a little better than okay. But Tennessee is going to take shots, and they're probably going to connect on a bunch of them, and they're going to score points. And Pitt is going to need to show that they can do it too. Pitt is going to need to show that they can win in that kind of game. And so, but we don't know. We don't know if they can do it. We don't know if Frank Cignetti can call that kind of game. And maybe more to the point of what we're talking about here, we don't know if Kedon Slovis can win in that kind of game. Yeah, I mean, from what we've seen of him at Pitt, I think he probably did it at USC. But we haven't. We're waiting for him to show that he can do it here at Pitt. And so, you know, all we have is one game against West Virginia. And we evaluate every angle of that, trying to find an answer to this question. And I think Narduzzi's comments about the wide receivers shed a lot of light that I think maybe changes some of the perspective. And the fact that his yards after the catch percentage was not that out of line with what most top quarterbacks are doing, you know, I think that should affect the perception a little bit as well, I think. But I'm still bullish on Kedon Slovis. I'm still optimistic about his, you know, what he's going to be able to do this season. He's just going to have to actually go out and do it and show that he can do it. And this weekend, this Saturday's game is going to be a real opportunity for him to do so. Before we get into a little bit more about the Tennessee game, new polls came out yesterday. Pitt, as we kind of predicted or expected, I shouldn't say that as expected thing. I hate when media guys do that. As expected. The best was this week, you know, when Steelers reporters expressed no surprise whatsoever that Kenny Pickett was third on the depth chart, only to then the next day find out that Kenny Pickett was actually supposed to be second on the depth chart, and it was a clerical error. So there was a lot of contradictory as expected statements. But anyway, as we talked about, Pitt ends up standing pat at 17. NC State drops 5 spots from 13 in the AP poll we're talking about here, 13 to 18 despite a win. Arkansas jumps over Pitt. Florida makes its debut in the AP poll at 12, so they jump in as well. But Pitt stands pat at 17. One of the few teams to stay in their spot. You know, Clemson dropped from 4 to 5, but Alabama stays at 1. Texas A&M stays at 6. Pitt stays at 17, and Kentucky stays at 20. In the coaches poll, Pitt actually went up 2 spots. Went up from 16 to 14. Jumped over Utah, and I don't know if anybody fell out of the rankings. But regardless, you know, this is a week and an opportunity where Pitt's going to have a chance to really make a big move. Tennessee is now ranked. They jumped into the AP poll this week after beating Ball State. They're now number 24 in the AP poll. They're the top vote getter just outside the top 25 in the coaches poll. If Pitt can win somewhat convincingly this weekend, and maybe just if Pitt can win, there should be an opportunity to go up. We'll talk later. We'll talk on Friday about other games around the around the coastal, around the conference, and around the country. Other games to keep an eye on as it relates to Pitt's spot in the ACC and Pitt's spot in these polls. But I think they should have an opportunity. If they can beat an SEC team, even though it's at home, a ranked SEC team, there should be a good chance to move into the top 15, particularly if they look good, and maybe get in, start sniffing close to that top 12, and things will get real interesting. But we'll keep an eye on that. For now, number 17 Pitt hosting number 24 Tennessee on Saturday. Of course, Tennessee's got the tempo. We all talk about that. We all know about that. The Pitt coaches have talked about that. They snap the ball super fast, 10 seconds every play. And this is the 4th time they've faced Josh Heupel's offense, twice at UCF, last year at Tennessee. We've seen some creative ways to slow down that offense, but one play that I didn't forget about, but I brought it up to Charlie Partridge yesterday when we talked to him, and it was certainly curious during the game, and I remember it happening, and I made a note of it. It was in the third quarter, kind of early in the third quarter. Pitt had just scored to tie the game at 17. This was actually, that touchdown drive had the Jared Wayne 64-yard catch and run, speaking of yards after the catch. First play of West Virginia's next drive, West Virginia made a late substitution, late in the play clock. And when that happened, Pitt had an opportunity to make a substitution of its own. The defense always gets a chance to match the substitution. If the offense subs, they can't snap until the defense has a chance to make their substitution. Now, West Virginia made this substitution late, and so Pitt, seeing an opportunity, the referee wasn't going to let West Virginia snap the ball until Pitt had an opportunity to substitute. Pitt notices the play clock's running down and sends in Kalijah Cansey to replace David Green, I think it was. Cansey takes his time. Here I come, coming out to replace my guy. Gonna line up on the D-line. Taps him, hey man, go on. David Green or Tyler Bentley, whoever it was. Okay, I'm going to get off the field now. West Virginia has to call a timeout. Now, it ultimately didn't matter. I think West Virginia took the other 2 timeouts home with them to Morgantown. I guess it's such a short trip, you don't mind a little extra baggage. That was the only timeout they called. But in terms of a strategy, and I give Pitt credit for this because I don't think they always think this quickly on their feet. Seeing that the play clock was running down and West Virginia is making a substitution, to send Cansey in for a rather slow sub is some gamesmanship, some real gamesmanship, and it ended up costing West Virginia a timeout. Now, it's not like Pitt was, entirely behind this scenario. West Virginia, messed up by making a late substitution like that, but a pretty clever play on a drive that ended up being a 3-and-out. Now, didn't matter. The timeout wasn't the reason they went 3-and-out. And like I say, they didn't use their 2 timeouts anyway. So it's not like it cost West Virginia late in the game. But something interesting to watch. And maybe something that we'll try to take advantage of if they can against Tennessee. Although I don't think Tennessee is going to make those same mistakes. Now, also interesting, speaking of the defensive line, Pitt used 23 defensive line combinations against West Virginia, which has to be some kind of record. Charlie Partridge said he doesn't know if it's a record or not. I think it has to be a record. 23 combinations. I don't think you're going to see that against Tennessee on Saturday. You're not going to see much mid-series subs. And what you will see, I think, if they get an opportunity to sub mid-series, 5-6 plays into a drive, they'll do all 4 D linemen. If Tennessee finally makes a sub of their own, Pitt will do a line change on the defensive line. But you're not going to see quite as many combinations as you saw against West Virginia. And then the other play that I keep coming back to, and I know I talked about it on the live show after the game, the post-game show, and I've tried to bring it up. I forget if I brought it up the last 2 days here on the Morning Pitt, but it has to get a shout out. Marquez Williams. All right, now this is right after Bub Means fumbled, right? Let me find the exact spot here. We're in the second quarter. And Pitt's down 7-3. All right. West Virginia scores to make it 7-3. Pitt punts. West Virginia punts. Pitt fumbles. I mean, Bub Means 1st and 15 from the West Virginia 46. Makes a catch. Makes a great move and ends up fumbling, giving the ball over to West Virginia. They take over at their own 32. 5-yard run. 2nd and 5 from the 37. Quick screen pass. Marquez Williams is being blocked. He's got his left arm engaged by the West Virginia receiver blocking. With the other hand, reaches out and pops the ball out. Just as he's reaching as the ball carrier is going past him, pops the ball out for a fumble that Eric Howlett recovers. Huge play in the game, early in the game, and a lot would obviously happen after that. Most notably MJ Devonshire making his own turnover. Speaking of Pitt defenders forcing a turnover. But this play, as a recovery from the Bub Means fumble, to get the ball right back, give the ball to Pitt Pitt's offense at the West Virginia 35, and they would then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plays and score their first touchdown of the game and take a 10-7 lead. Huge play from Marquez Williams. Strong play. Great play. And one that is, there's so many plays that happen over the course of 60 minutes, and you'll see something like that, or you'll see something like the Cansey thing with the forcing a timeout and think, wow, that was big, man. That was a huge play. I can't believe that. We're going to be talking about that. And then so many other things happen by the end of the game that you forget about it. Marquez Williams gets mad credit for that game, or for that play. And I think he played well overall, but that forced fumble was a huge, huge play. And like I said, it led directly to Pitt's first touchdown, a 35-yard touchdown drive, which is, great field position due to just an outstanding effort from the senior cornerback. All right, and the last thing I got to talk about, let me find his name. My man in Tennessee, Jimmy Hyams. I believe is his name. Let me just double check. Jimmy Hyams in Knoxville puts out a tweet that Tennessee was mad about the ticket allotment that Pitt sent them and returned it, and none of their fans bought it. That Pitt sent them 2 sections, one section in the upper level and one section in the lower bowl. And Tennessee was mad because they felt like they gave Pitt better tickets last year for the game in Knoxville. And they were bitter about it, and the tickets got returned unsold. I think they sold the lower bowl, or maybe Tennessee is putting their band there or something like that. And it was a big to-do. And Tennessee fans are really mad about Pitt trying to pull a fast one. Tennessee, according to one fanboy blog, Tennessee fans are mad, or Pitt was scared that Tennessee fans were going to take over the entire stadium, like West Virginia did. They didn't. Listen, here's the thing you need to know. And if you start seeing a Tennessee fan going on about this, this is what you need to tell them. Pitt gave Tennessee the same ticket allotment, the same visitors ticket allotment they give every opponent. The same ticket allotment they gave West Virginia last week, the same ticket allotment they gave Clemson last season, the same ticket allotment they gave Penn State 3 years before that, the same ticket allotment they gave Notre Dame. Well, no, I don't think there were any fans in 2020, so don't count that. They gave them the same ticket allotment they give everybody. There was nothing different about it. They get a section or two or whatever up in the 500 level, and they get a section down in the open end of the end zone. It's a little pie-shaped section right near the end of the end zone, or right near the end of that section of bleachers down on the visitor's side, near the open end of the stadium, or what used to be the open end of the stadium, what we used to call the open end of the stadium. Is pretty closed off now. And that's what they've always had. And a lot of times opposing teams will put their band there and additional fans in that lower bowl section. But it's the same ticket allotment. They didn't do anything special for Tennessee. They didn't do anything different or unconventional. If there's anything unconventional in this whole situation, it's Tennessee throwing a fit about it. I don't know what your problem is, Tennessee. Cincinnati's going to get the same ticket allotment. Notre Dame gets the same ticket allotment. Wisconsin's going to get the same ticket allotment. Oklahoma State got the same ticket allotment back in 2017. UCF got the same ticket allotment in 2019. Rhode Island is going to get the same ticket allotment in 2 weeks that Tennessee is getting this week, that West Virginia got last week. It's all the same. It's just Pitt's policy. It's nothing special about Tennessee. It's just the tickets that Pitt gives out. On that note, we'll leave you and send you off into your Wednesday. We appreciate you watching the Morning Pitt. As always, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video. That really does help. It makes me feel good. And I think it helps us get exposure for these Morning Pitt videos that we're doing, spreading the word, reaching more Pitt fans, which is always the goal here, to kind of get more reach out of this thing, get more engagement. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Leave a comment. We can have a little interaction there in the comment section of the video. And, it's fun. And I enjoy doing these videos. I hope you enjoy watching them. Make sure you tune in tonight, 8:30 p.m., youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for the Panther-Lair Show. We'll talk about all these topics and more. If you have been watching these videos all week and you have a couple questions you want to ask, that's your time to do it. Post your comments and questions in the chat screen during the live stream, and we'll have a little back and forth. We'll have some interaction like a talk show. It's fun. I always look forward to it. and it's good times. So thanks for watching the Morning Pit. Make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Have a great rest of the day Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow morning on Thursday with the Morning Pit right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.